I'm a male nurse in the ER at a big hospital in San Francisco, and, as is tradition, Thanksgiving night was absolute chaos. My wife works at the same hospital in labor and delivery. Usually, we try to meet up for at least one quick break during our shift, but between babies being born nonstop and the ER packed to the walls, we hadn't seen each other all night. So when my phone buzzed, I figured she was calling to say, "Hey, you want to get a bite in the cafeteria?" I pick up, and immediately hear a man screaming profanities in the background. My wife, who's fluent in Spanish, is trying to calm him down. She tells me their pager isn't working, and they need security, now. I hang up, call security, tell my team what's happening, and bolt for labor and delivery, with my heart in my throat. And that's when I almost run straight into him. This guy is furious. Not huge, but definitely the kind of strong you get from places that aren't gyms. Covered in prison ink. Total gangbanger energy. I work out, but I knew instantly this guy could wipe the floor with me. He sees me, gives me this slow, sick grin, and starts walking toward me, ranting in Spanish. I only understand pieces of it, but what I understand terrifies me. I'm backing up fast, smashing the buzzer for the ER door like my life depends on it. Because it just might. He's maybe a foot away when the door finally clicks open, and a doctor yanks me inside. The guy punches the door a few times, then drags his finger across his throat while smiling at us. Moments later, police and security swarm the hallway. It takes 2 officers and 2 guards just to get him on the ground. Once things calm down, I finally get to my wife. She's shaken but okay, and she tells me what happened. A 14-year-old girl had come in, high fever, vomiting, and a swollen belly. The man claimed he was her brother and insisted that they get the baby out. But when they did an ultrasound, they realized she wasn't pregnant at all. Her stomach was full of drug packets. Unfortunately, it's heartbreakingly common. Young girls brought across the border as drug mules. When staff told him that she needed emergency surgery and that he wasn't getting his product, he lost it. Thankfully, the girl survived. However, odds are she'll be deported when she recovers. It was Thanksgiving 2011. I was spending the holiday at my grandparents' farm in the tiny town of Seville, Florida, just north of the land. I'd eaten way too much as usual and was getting ready to drive back to school in Tallahassee. Before hitting the highway, I stopped at the one little gas station in town to fill up. I had just finished pumping gas when a woman walked up to me. She looked pretty rough, ratty clothes, messy bleach blonde hair, but this was rural Florida. Plenty of kind people looked a little worn around the edges, so I didn't think much of it. She told me her car had run out of gas and pointed toward an old beat-up sedan by the convenience store. She asked if I could spare some cash to help her get home. Normally, I don't hand out cash at gas stations, but it was Thanksgiving weekend, and I was feeling generous. I told her I'd be happy to put a little gas in her car. But that's when things got weird. She kept insisting that I give her cash instead, saying the car was so empty she couldn't even drive it to the pump. I should have walked away right then, but I was in a good mood, so I offered a compromise. If she had a gas can, I'd fill it for her. No cash. She didn't like that idea, but eventually she went back to the car and brought out a gas can. I started filling it up, and then she put her hand on my arm. "Do you have a girlfriend?" she asked. I told her no, politely. She said she wanted to pay me back somehow for the gas, and asked if I wanted to come back to her place. Again, I told her no, less politely this time. She kept touching my shoulder, thanking me, and then she offered me a blowjob behind the station. At that point, I stopped the pump, got in my car, and drove off, leaving her there with the gas can. A little later, I called my mom to tell her about the creepy, sleazy encounter. She paused and asked, "Did she have ratty blonde hair? Did it look like she was on drugs?" I said yes, and asked how she could possibly know that. It turns out, the woman had been all over the local news. She was a known prostitute in town, and had been at a party earlier that day. Apparently, an exchange had gone wrong, and her baby had actually been kidnapped by one of her clients and left under a bush somewhere in town. She didn't even report the child missing for several hours. Both she and the client were eventually arrested and charged. About 15 years ago, my uncle, my aunt, and my 2 cousins inherited a grandfather clock after my aunt's father passed away. It was more than 150 years old, beautifully carved wood, hand-painted panels showing scenes of 19th century rural life. The night before Thanksgiving, they set it up in their foyer and wound it so it would be running when the whole family came over the next day. After that, they finished prepping the house, setting out cups, arranging dishes, and getting everything ready so the morning would be easier. That night, my aunt and uncle were jolted awake by the sound of voices downstairs, followed by what sounded like marbles bouncing across the kitchen floor. My uncle assumed it was his twins fooling around, so he got up to tell them to knock it off. But as he walked past their rooms, he saw both kids sound asleep. When he went downstairs, the voices stopped, but the kitchen looked lived in. The cups they had neatly set out were moved around, like someone had been using them. Ice was scattered on the floor beneath the refrigerator dispenser. Somehow, he convinced himself it was nothing, and he didn't mention any of it to the family on Thanksgiving. But that was only night 1. Thanksgiving night, after everyone left, one of my cousins was lying in bed when she heard a little boy laughing in the hallway. Her door was open, so she glanced out and said she saw the shadow of a small boy run down the hall, followed by the shadow of a man wearing what looked like a top hat. In the morning, when she told her sister said she'd seen and heard the exact same thing. Needless to say, the next night, the girls slept in the same bed. They huddled together under the covers. Just as they were drifting off, they both awoke to the sound of footsteps in the hallway. Slow, careful steps. They got louder and closer, until it sounded like someone was pacing right in the room with them. One of my cousins, the one sleeping on the outside edge of the bed, finally pulled the blanket down just enough to peek, and she saw a shadowy figure standing there, staring. She screamed, hit the lights, and the figure vanished. My aunt and uncle ran in, and by then, both girls were crying and shaking. My aunt and uncle believed them instantly, as they had heard their own strange sounds. The worst part, they later said, was feeling completely helpless. They had no idea how to comfort their daughters. A couple of days later, my uncle had to leave town on a business trip. My aunt and the girls decided to camp together on an air mattress in the living room. They played a movie for background noise and eventually fell asleep. At 3:30 a.m., one of the girls woke up freezing. The room had turned ice cold, even though the heat was on. The TV sleep timer had shut off the movie, and when she looked toward the sliding glass doors leading to the back deck, she saw them. The silhouettes of a little boy and little girl, standing just inside the doors, holding hands and watching them sleep. She nudged her mom and sister awake, and both of them saw it. My aunt jumped up and hit the light switch, and instantly, the children were gone. The room gradually warmed back up, while the kitchen, just a room away, had stayed warm the entire time. For the next 2 nights before my uncle returned, nothing else happened. And when he got home, he noticed the grandfather clock in the foyer had stopped. It needed to be wound again. The time that was frozen on the clock, 3:30. That was the moment everything clicked. Every strange thing had happened while the clock was running, and it stopped when the clock did. They never wound the clock again, and from that point on, nothing else happened. For reasons I still can't understand, they never got rid of it. My aunt and uncle eventually divorced, and she keeps the clock in the hallway of her new apartment. 15 years later, it still just sits there, unwound, and nothing has happened since. They won't use the word ghost to describe what they saw. In fact, they don't even like talking about it at all. But when they do, their faces drain of color, their eyes gloss over, and the hairs on their arms stand straight up. As for me, there will never be a grandfather clock in my house.